This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Nick Larkey! Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front!
Hello and welcome back to North Pod. We've finally won a game. 11 losses in a row have finally come to an end. We've won in Perth again. We won in Perth last year, earlier in the year. And we have managed to win again. We've won finally a game for this year. It's just a relief. So welcome into the podcast this week. Hopefully it's a more upbeat version than you're used to listening to. We've kept aside to well under 100 points. We'll just ignore their inaccurate kicking and not so worry about that. But yeah, look, apologies if this podcast is not what you're used to, because I'm not really used to reacting to a win. We'll go through the usual stuff, team selection, story of the game, 5 stars in the North podium, positives and negatives. Let's hope that this has got a different vibe to it, this podcast, because we have been waiting for this for a while, and it's just a relief. It's a pressure valve release that we've finally got here. I can't say that I was jumping up and down the couch. I was relieved. And I'm sure there'll be many fans out there feeling the same way. So let's have a look at team selection. We're coming off the bye, so it's a little bit of an odd team selection, but it's still in and outs from a fortnight ago. In Jai Simpkin and Callan Dawson, so fantastic to have those two returning from their injuries. Out Zane Dersma, who was managed, and Charlie Lazaro, who was omitted. I think they're being generous with their wording for Dersma, because I think he was also omitted, otherwise he would have been injured. But you can't argue with either of those omissions. I don't think Dersma's been finding it really hard to get his hands on the ball, and Charlie Lazaro is just, he's what he was last year, essentially. He finds it hard to play and get his hands on the ball when he's not playing his preferred midfield role, and there's just not really a fit for him in the side. So, yeah, an interesting in and outs, I suppose. Callan Dawson's the interesting one in that he's a tall, so we did go taller than we have in previous weeks with an extra tall in there, and that meant that Will Dawson was going forward so that Callan Dawson could come in and play defence. And yeah, I guess we'll talk about what that looks like. Eddie Ford was named the sub, which, I do think is a bit of an unpopular opinion with fans, but I think that he has work to do on the defensive side of his game. As a result of Will Dawson getting injured, he came in pretty early anyway and played 3 quarters. But match result, it was West Coast 8-17-65 to North Melbourne 11-8-74. So 9-point winners. And you did hear me correctly there. West Coast kicked 17 points. So I do think it is worth us, that puts into perspective things a little bit. They kicked 17 points, and there was a period there where I think they were 2 goals 15, something like that, early in the last quarter. So, a few things did have to go right for us to win this game, but it doesn't actually matter at the end of the day, because the result is the result. We've won by 9 points, and given we've lost 11 on the trot, and before that we'd lost 17 in a row, 18, something, whatever it was, probably more than that actually. Yeah, given we've had a lot of losses recently, we're going to take the win. And that is really a story of the game. We won the game. And nothing else actually matters. We won the game, and we had to work really hard to get across the line, which, was partly our fault, because we should have had the game all done at the start of the last quarter. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. We led by 33 points early in the last quarter, and we gave up that lead with about 5 minutes to go. So the fact that we were able to get the lead back, Simpkin won a questionable holding the ball free kick inside 50, went back and kicked the goal. That's one of those decisions that's going to get talked about in the media. It's going to be scrutinised, and personally, I don't know if I want that to be called all the time. I thought Yo really just took possession of the ball whilst he happened to be on his knees. Certainly there was no prior. Maybe you could make an argument that he wasn't really making a genuine attempt. I'm not sure about that. But look, I just think that it's a 50-50 call. It's gone our way. And, as a side that's dwelling down the bottom, you don't tend to get a lot of those 50-50 calls. So we take it. I think the fact that we then kicked a goal straight afterwards kind of franks the result a little bit at least. And worst case scenario, it was going to be a ball up, 45 metres out from goal for us. So it's still in our forward 50. There's still a chance that from that clearance, given we'd dominated the clearances all day, there's a chance that we could get a goal from that anyway. You could also mount an argument that Elliot Yeo had taken Wardlaw's head off a moment or two before that free kick. So I think all of that's going to get talked about in the media, and it's obviously West Coast fans are going to bring it up. But honestly, the win is just so important. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're a North fan and you're worried about that, or you're thinking about getting into an argument about that, I'd just be thinking to myself, I'm not going to worry about it. We won the game. Like, let's move on. Because there's certainly been things that have gone against us in recent years, and I'm not talking about an agenda. I'm just talking about luck of the draw. I think we've gotten unlucky in some things. So. I think it's such an important win. It cannot be understated. Archer, Wardlaw, Pink, and Will Dawson get their first AFL wins. Obviously, Zach Fisher's first win in North Melbourne colours. It is a shame that Zane Dersma and Colby McKercher weren't playing. Dersma was over there. It looks as though he was the travelling emergency, so he at least got to be amongst the group in the rooms and on match day. But you can't put a price on the win. So I'm not going to lose sleep over the fact that those two weren't playing, because we just need this win. Like I said off the top, it's a pressure release. It's something positive, and it's great for anyone involved in the club, the players, the coaches, the support staff, family members, all the fans, everyone. It's just it's a win that we can hang our hat on and say we saw some progress. Was not a pretty win, but you do not have to win pretty. And I think, unlike the Gold Coast game last year, there's no element of, should we have won that game? Like, this is one of those ones where we just won. There's no bad side or negative side to it. We did it the hard way, but I thought, given we led for more than half the day, and I thought that going forward we were the more dangerous looking side, I do think it's a deserved win. Putting aside the free kick, putting aside the inaccurate kicking, I still think, on balance, we were the better side. So, just such a relief to win. I'm sure everyone's feeling the same way, and I feel good. I think that would be the overwhelming emotion from North Melbourne fans, or I hope it is, that we're feeling good and we can block out the noise that's going to come from the media and from some other fans, I think, during the week. Let's have a look at the North podium. So 5 stars for the game. This is my top 4 North Melbourne performing players and the best opposition player. They get votes, and then we have a look at who's standing on the North podium, which is the top 3 currently in the season. 4 votes, it has to go to Jai Simpkin. I think, he's had a really up and down season. He's had a couple of injuries. He copped that head knock from Jimmy Webster in the preseason that I think really impacted the way that he started the year, and he's also been playing more of a high half forward role, which has dampened his impact on games at times. He had a fantastic game. Started really, really well. Was good throughout, but I thought his start was really promising, particularly because he spent a lot of time in the middle in the first quarter, and then kicked the 2 of our 3 goals in the last quarter, one from a mark, and one from the free kick that I mentioned before. So a really huge impact at times where it mattered. In terms of his statistics, 28 disposals, 2 goals, 5 marks, 1 of them contested, 7 tackles, 5 clearances, 7 inside 50s. Just did a bit of everything, and this is even better than the game that I think is kind of his benchmark for the year. I've mentioned before that if he could collect 21, 22 disposals and kick a goal, playing this sort of high half forward hybrid role, I think that's a win. But what we saw from him in this game was just that contested and freakish, agile play that we've seen in his best and fairest years. He was stepping players. He was kicking 50-metre goals. He was giving off to the right player. He wasn't in that, I don't think there were too many times where he just threw it on the boot and kicked it long and hoped and turned it over. There's always going to be a couple of those when you're getting a quick clearance. So, I don't begrudge it now and then, but I thought this was one of the few times this year where he's looked absolutely back to his best. So I'm not sure if this is something that's going to continue or if this is, this is the new standard for him. I don't expect him to play like this every week, but it was just fantastic to see our co-captain back to his best, and just playing like he was enjoying his footy. And you saw how much it meant to him when he kicked those 2 goals in the last quarter. The one he thought that he'd sealed it early in the last quarter, but then he absolutely won it for us at the end. And I wouldn't underestimate how tricky that kick was. Like, sure, he was more or less directly in front, but he's 50 metres out. He's just won a free kick with 4 minutes or 3 minutes left to go in the game. It's been a long day in Perth, and he's punted it 50 metres straight. It's a massive kick. So 4 votes to Jai. Amazing game. 3 votes LDU. I think he was our most consistent midfielder across the game. 26 disposals, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 3 clearances, 4 inside 50s, 5 intercepts, had a goal assist. Just did a bit of everything, similar to Jai, and he was a difference maker. He was the one that when the ball was in tight, he had that fancy footwork, the ability to get free and find space where other players didn't. I don't think he was his best game in terms of how he's played for the year, but I do think it was one of those games where his impact around the contest made such a massive difference and really allowed some of our other mids like Simpkin and Wardlaw, Powell at times, Sheasel to be released and to find some success on the outside. He was just an absolute bull. There was one point in the last quarter where Gerard Healy, everyone's favourite commentator, was giving it to him and saying he needs to step up, the game's on the line now, where is he? And he happened to be on the bench. And Gerard didn't even really apologise for making the silly comment. We won the game, Jason. We won the game. LDU, he was fantastic. He's probably pretty hard done by not to be best on, but I think Simpkin's last quarter goals just got him across the line for me. But make no mistake about it, LDU for me was the best midfielder on the ground because of his capacity to just find space where there was none. So it's certainly not one of the games where he's filled the stat sheet as much as he has in others, but his impact today and the fact that it actually resulted in scores often for us, or certainly territory, was a massive win. 2 votes, Nick Larkey, 15 disposals, 5 goals, 6 marks, 1 of them contested, 4 tackles, 3 inside 50s. Yeah, he was back to his best, and I think we can't underestimate how much of a confidence player he is. We've seen the past month of football or so, he's found it really hard for whatever reason. His kicking's been a little off, his marking's been off at times, and he's looked a little out of form, and I think he just needed those 1 or 2 that he kicked early-ish in the second quarter to get him going. And he didn't look back. Like, when the ball was going forward, he looked like our most dangerous forward. I mean, go figure, he is our best forward. But yeah, the 5 goals that he kicked up to 3/4 time, he looked really hard to stop. And that's the sort of Nick Larkey that we saw at times last year, even when we were getting belted. So the fact that he's been able to kick 5 goals in a win for the team, I think is a massive win. And just to have him back in form is really positive, because we know he's a real leader at the club. He was interviewed after the game by Kath Lockton and spoke really well. He's a massive, massive get for the club, and I think to have him back in form for the second half of the year is really exciting. So hopefully he can kick a couple more bags to finish off the year. But yeah, a great game from Larkey, and playing against a well-organised and quite skillful West Coast defence, I think is a fantastic result to come back with 5 goals. It's interesting after a win, because normally after a loss, I'm sort of scraping the barrel to try and find, my 3rd or my 4th vote. Whereas today, I think there was genuinely probably 8 players that could have won a vote. I've given the 1 vote to Jackson Archer. His stats are not going to jump off the page. 12 disposals, 2 marks, 1 of them contested, 5 tackles, 6 intercepts. He played a massive game on Liam Ryan, shut him completely out of the game until the last quarter, when Liam Ryan was thrown into the middle to try and make a bit of a difference, and he certainly did. And Archer played, I would say, a near-perfect defensive game on Liam Ryan. Didn't allow him any space, didn't allow Liam Ryan to step him and get around him. His capacity to corral and to accurately or to execute a tackle correctly was a real difference maker in the game. His contested mark that he took off halfback was a massive one. I certainly didn't think that he had that sort of play in him. He's a defend first player, so he's always going for a spoil as opposed to trying to take a pack mark. But he took a pack mark about 70 metres out from our goal. West Coast was trying to clear it, and then sent it back in. We scored from that. It was just, I think that was a real coming of age moment for him personally. And this game was just a real showcase in he got absolutely everything out of his body today. He's not the most gifted athletically player. We know that Glenn was the same, but he absolutely has that dogged determination to win each contest. And yeah, I think he deserved the vote today. What I saw from him today made me think that there could be an AFL future for him. And I'm not to say that I've completely written him off in the past. I just, I haven't been sure, because the determination only gets you so far. You also need to have some strength and some pace and some attributes of an AFL player. And based on what I saw, I do think that Archer, he's got enough there that he can work with if he continues his form from this game. So yeah, massive output from him. As I said, shut Liam Ryan out, and more importantly, I think his defensive work across the entire day was, near flawless. So fantastic work from Jackson Archer. He gets the 1 vote. In terms of who was unlucky, and this is what I'm talking about, I thought Shees any other week gets a vote. He had 30 disposals and 4 goal assists, so pretty hard to look past him. I thought he was probably our second best midfielder. Tristan Sherry had 10 tackles, 9 clearances, 32 hitouts. But unfortunately had some clangers that I'll talk about soon. So that probably was the thing that left him out. And Georgie Wardlaw, 21 disposals, 10 clearances, 7 tackles. Again, any other week, I think he's getting votes. He was massive around the contest, but I've only got 4 spots, so they're probably the 3 that are unlucky to miss out. They also played really well, so when you see the social media posts and you go on, people want to come at me about not including those 3. Just know that they're next in line, and it was really hard. But I do try and look at what defensive players are doing, because Archer's stats obviously do not tell the story of the impact that he had on the game, and I think that he deserves a vote. In terms of the best opposition player, I gave it to Elliot Yeo. 23 disposals, kicked a goal, 13 tackles, 8 clearances, 4 inside 50s, and he was definitely West Coast's best midfielder. When the game was on the line in the last quarter, he was one of those players that rose to the occasion and tried to will his side across the line. The fact that he was the one that was caught holding the ball late in the last quarter is also a little bit sweet. But I think across the 4 quarters, he was their best player, and the one that particularly around stoppage, which was a real area of weakness for West Coast, he was the one that did look a little dangerous. He's got fantastic spread. His 13 tackles, he's a fantastic contested tackler as well. So, yeah, I thought Yo was their best, and certainly was one of those players that looked like he could take the game away from us at times. In terms of standings, it is a little interesting now, because LDU's 3 votes has drawn him level with Harry Sheasel. They both sit atop the podium right now on 21 votes. Tristan Sherry in second place on 17, and Tom Powell in the bronze medal position on 10. Although we know once Sheasel and LDU are no longer tied, Powell will drop off, which is ironic. But yeah, some movement at the top, which is interesting, because Sheasel at times has looked like he was going to run away with it, but LDU has drawn level with him on 21 votes. Before we jump into the positives and negatives, just a quick shout out to all North Melbourne fans and everyone listening. Please help me get the word out there about this podcast. It's always easy to talk about North Melbourne after a win, so let your mates know that you've been listening to the North Pod. It'd be a massive help if you can subscribe on your podcast service, give me a rating or a review if you can, and you can follow me on most social media at North Pod Show. You can also buy me a coffee. It's a small way to support the show. I do promise to buy a Coke, as I am not a coffee drinker. You can find the link for that in the show notes. All right, let's get through these negatives, because obviously we would much prefer to focus on the positives. I think, number one, letting them back into the game in the fourth quarter has to be the biggest negative. As I mentioned earlier, we were 33 points up once Jai Simpkin kicked that goal early in the last quarter. And I think one of the commentators, I think it might have been our favourite Jared, said it's party time for North Melbourne now. And I remember, like, I was on the couch with Shannon, my partner, and we both said, why would you say that? That's absolutely not what we need to hear. And because as North fans, we've seen this movie before. We know that the game's not over until it's absolutely over. And yeah, we unfortunately just let them back into the contest. Liam Ryan went to the middle, Elliot Yeo got going, and we just weren't able to slow the game down and take a breath. And we've seen this many times this year. We're pretty much good for a streak of goals from the opposition every week. So 6 goals in a row after they'd only managed 2 goals to three-quarter time, and they hit the lead. This is just a reflection of how we will become better as a side. We need to be able to cut off that run at 3 or 4 goals and arrest the momentum. It's not easy to do in Perth. The crowd got involved late. They've been pretty quiet except for the occasional boos for most of the day. And then once West Coast kicked a couple, you could hear them kind of rise to the occasion and think they're on here. And after dominating the midfield battle all day, we had probably had a 20-minute patch there that cost us 6 goals and nearly the game, and it was just our inability to get our hands on the ball. And I think that was reflected in the fact that Liam Ryan, who's an experienced, bigger body, went in there. Elliot Yeo started getting his hands on it, and our young mids just got a little stunned for a little while there. I think in the future, you just love us to be able to junk the game up for a little bit, sort of try and get a repeat stoppage game for, 5 or 10 minutes, just try and slow things down, but we weren't able to do that. It had been a real defensive battle all day. Like, it was really, both sides defensively were on top. And, as tends to happen in last quarters or later in the game opened up a little bit, and it wasn't as though our backline was much worse. It was just the ball was coming in there faster and with less pressure on it. And as a result, Waterman was able to get out on the lead and get hit on the chest. So it was moments like that and things like that which allowed West Coast back into the game. But yeah, I mean, that's a negative. That's one of the things that we need to work on stopping and stamping out of our game, because if you allow teams to kick 6 or 7 unanswered goals, you're not going to win many games. And we were fortunate that we were good enough to get back in and win this one, but most games, or every game this year, we haven't been able to. So that is definitely a negative. I think something that we have to, it's an obvious thing, but maybe something that could get missed. West Coast's inaccuracy made life probably a little bit easier for us than it should have been. They had 25 scoring shots to our 19. They led inside 50s 58-43, and the ball did spend large periods of time parked in their forward line. Now, I don't buy into the dialogue or the idea that 25 scoring shots to 19 means that they were the better side, because there were times there where they, scored 2 or 3 or 4 points in a row, and if they were to kick a goal there, it goes back to the middle, and those other points don't happen. So it's not a complete, you can't just look at that and go, great, they were the better side, they had more shots. But I do think, obviously, that their inability to kick the ball through the big sticks up until the last quarter has a massive impact on the rest of the game. So, a better team than West Coast probably takes more advantage of that, the scoring shots and the inside 50s in particular, and, puts us to the sword a little bit. We still had more turnovers, 69-57. Our disposal efficiency was down at 68%, which is 6% lower than our already low season average. So it was by no means a skillful game across the match. It was mistakes galore from both sides, and both of us turned it over and made silly errors in crucial areas. So, obviously we take the win, but it wasn't a fantastic spectacle as you would expect, a game between two sides towards the bottom of the ladder. There were errors and there were things going wrong for both sides across the game. And that's an area where we can improve, because we've seen it all year. We make silly mistakes. We cost ourselves goals at crucial times. And yeah, I mean, that was on display again this week. Steve-O blew a perfect chance to score a goal early in the third quarter. He got smothered after we had an out number after we'd gotten out the back. He had the opportunity to give the hand over to Zerha or to kick it earlier, and he just didn't, so we blew a chance there. Tristan Sherry, who I mentioned earlier, he was a fantastic ruckman across the course of the game, and certainly I thought won the ruck battle. But he was solely responsible for 3 of their goals, and at one point he was responsible for 3 out of 4 of their goals. He gifted Darling the only goal of the first quarter when he pushed him in the back in a ruck contest late. He played on, or at least feigned to play on, and got called to play on, and then got ran down from behind in the second quarter, which resulted in the West Coast going the other way for a goal. And he got far too easily pushed out of a ruck contest early on in the fourth quarter, which allowed Flynn to kick one. So at one point, he was solely responsible for 3 of their goals. Now, I love Tristan Sherry. I think he's had a fantastic year, but unfortunately, those 3 clangers were enough for me to think that he wasn't in our best 4. And he'll learn from that. I'll talk a little bit about another moment of his later on in the podcast, so it's not all doom and gloom, but these are the sorts of things that he needs to work on in his game so that there is no dispute that he's a fantastic ruckman, because whilst he filled the stats sheet, as I said, there were a few errors in his game that I would like to see him get sorted out. Even Charlie Comben, who we love, he spilled an intercept mark late in the last quarter that allowed West Coast out the back to score a goal. So these are the sorts of things that we just need to minimise. I've picked out a couple of instances there, but they're not the only players that were responsible. They're just the ones that, to me, stood out in my mind that directly resulted in goals, or in Steve-O's case, not goals. These are the things that we've absolutely got to minimise, and it's the things that, if you were to halve that, we win the game comfortably because we're leading by 40-odd points and we never get overrun. So we've seen it all year. That's nothing new. It's just, more feedback that we need to try and stamp these things out of our game. And the last negative, I obviously don't want to dwell too long on them for this week. Will Dawson was trialled forward. All the talk was this week that he was going to do that. He'd been training forward. And it made sense to move him forward if we were going to bring Callan Dawson back in, because otherwise would have been far too tall. It was interesting that we went as tall as we did for this week, but unfortunately we didn't really get a chance to see him contribute. He copped a shoulder injury in the first quarter. Looked to me as though it was a hip and shoulder, which was a fantastic hip and shoulder that he put on, or that he was part of, I think, with Jack Darling. But he must have hurt his shoulder in that incident, because he went down to the rooms and didn't return to play. We saw him in a sling afterwards, although it didn't look like he needed to keep it on all the time, because when he was singing the song, he took it off. So hopefully it's just a short injury for him, but it is disappointing, given he is another one of our young guns that we're hoping to get some AFL experience into. It's probably hard to see him getting back into the AFL side this year if everyone stays fit now, because Logue is really close to playing. Callan Dawson's back. So yeah, potentially his AFL opportunities might dry up a little bit for this year. But I think it's been great to get a couple of games of AFL experience into him. There might be a chance, there's always a chance that other injuries are going to crop up later in the year, but obviously would have loved to get him through this game and then possibly play 1 or 2 more before Griff comes back, because as I said, unless we're going to persist with Will Dawson forward, it's kind of hard to see him getting back into the side for this year. But anyway, we'll see what happens. It's we're only halfway through the season, so plenty can change from now. Let's have a look at the positives. I've got quite a few to talk through. I haven't limited myself to 3. For this week, I just thought let's try and lap it up, because we don't get many opportunities to do so. It was hard to know where to start, but I think the midfield winning it was just fantastic. It's a position that's touted to be our best, and I think it has the potential to be our best, but we're very young in there. I think having Simpkin spend some more time in there alongside LDU, having Shields run through there, it does obviously raise the profile and the age of that midfield and allows Wardlaw and Shees and Tom Powell a little bit more support. Obviously, the opposition wasn't much. Like, Tim Kelly didn't play and Harley Reid was suspended, so they didn't have as much class in there as they would otherwise have, West Coast, but you can only play who they put out there, and our midfield dominated except for that patch in the last quarter. 48 clearances to 30, and that was after a 10-0 start. We won the contested possession battle by 15, and like most of the year, it didn't always result in a territory win. The quality of our clearances is still an issue, but It was, I think, fantastic to see Wardlaw and LDU, Simpkin, Sherry, Sheasel were all massive around the ball. And yeah, I mean, I just think that the way our attitude and what we were looking to do was a significant improvement. We were looking for players under less pressure to give it off to. We ran in waves forward and were generally quite clean under pressure. LDU and Sheasel in particular were really level-headed and looked like the best version of themselves out there most of the day. And I think that's what was so pleasing about the performance. It wasn't as though these players were just racking up numbers and stuffing the stats sheet, but it was wasted possessions or they were turning it over every time. I thought there was a real want for them to share it around in a way that made sense for the team. And, you know, we're all going to learn from games like this. Were there things that we could improve? Absolutely. But I thought holistically this was our midfield's best game for the year, and funnily enough, we won the game on the back of it. So, yeah, fantastic that we were able to turn, you know, potential into some actual success in this game. It was great to see our young mids getting involved in that. It wasn't just LDU and Simpkin. It was Wardlaw and Powell and Sheasel alongside and new Ruckman and Sherry getting involved in the play and making a real difference in there. I talked about him earlier on, but Larkey getting back into form was a massive win. Such a confidence player. Yeah, that kick from 45 metres out on the boundary was massive. That was the real sign, and that was when I went, yep, he's back. He's feeling himself. So yeah, 5 goals contending with McGovern and Barras, and at times Edwards. A fantastic statement. He moves on to 24 goals for the year, which, you know, obviously pales in comparison to what he was able to put up last year, but given how poor his service has been this year and how infrequently the ball's gotten down there, and that he's probably had a bit of a form dip in the last month or so, he's back into the top 10 of the goal kicking, and yeah, hopefully this is more like what we're going to see from him for the rest of the year. I think one of the most important things that we got right in this game was our tackling and our pressure. In general, it was just a lot better than it's been all year. Almost, to me, it looked like we were really freshened up and ready for the contest after the bye. We won the tackle count 87-62, so we had 30 more than our season average, which is a massive, massive uptick. Just some players here to celebrate. Sherry, 10 tackles, Wardlaw, 7, Simpkin, 7, Scott, 6, Sheasel, Ford, LDU, Curtis, and Archer all had 5 tackles. So that's where our massive pressure and our massive tackle count's coming from. And it wasn't just the tackling, it was the corralling, it was the fact that we were often gang tackling and working collectively to try and stop the West Coast players. There was only 2 players without a tackle. One was Will Dawson, who, you know, was off from midway through the first quarter, and Zach Fisher. So everyone else had at least a tackle, and as I said, there were some that had massive counts. And I just thought the pressure really built. The tackles either stuck or we created a wave of pressure that, you know, just the Eagles were passing that pressure on to the next teammate. It's the sort of thing that we've been guilty of all year, where we're under so much pressure, we give a hospital handball to the next person, we make it their problem, and then they end up someone else ends up coughing it up. And I thought that's really what we created in the Eagles. It's what we've struggled to create all year, is that meaningful corralling. I think at times this year we've been able to corral, but it hasn't really resulted in actual pressure being on the opposition. And you saw it time and time again, the Eagles made mistakes or were able to force stoppages from situations where otherwise it looked like they may have gotten away. And I think particularly on Optus Stadium, which is a pretty big service, it's no mean feat. It's actually quite a challenge to play a pressure game on that Optus Stadium surface. There were some moments early on with Petrocelli. I think he was caught holding the ball a couple of times where he just really tried to take the game on and run into 3 or 4 players who were ready to gang tackle him. So that was a really, really strong point. And I mentioned it earlier, there was a moment in the last quarter where Liam Ryan grabbed the clearance from the middle of the ground. Most of the players had sort of ran forward, so he had some space. He made a kind of beeline for the wing, sort of was running at an angle towards the West Coast forward line, and Tristan Sherry just kept chasing him. Liam Ryan must have taken 2 or 3 bounces. Sherry kept chasing him, trying to cut him off at the angle. And it was one of those ones where early on in the chase you thought, all right, Liam Ryan's just going to burn him. But Sherry, who, full credit to him, it's the last quarter, He's in Perth. He's been rucking most of the day. He just kept running and kept going and actually gained ground on Liam Ryan when he had to slow slightly to kick the ball. Ended up impacting his kick with a little bit of a push, which resulted in the ball going out of bounds, not in the full, but dribbled out of bounds rather than hitting a target forward of the ball. And that's the sort of effort that I hope that the coaches are playing, this week and showing everyone again and just acknowledging the massive effort from Sherry. So I talked about his errors earlier on, and absolutely they should also be addressed. But when you see something like that, you just have to go, all right, this guy really wants it. He is absolutely committed to the cause here. And it's funny, like I think even though he had some real clangers in this game, he went up a peg in my books just from that one massive effort, because I don't think you'd begrudge him for kind of going at maybe 90%, making it look like he's chasing but not really chase. He absolutely gut ran to try and chase down Liam Ryan, and it did have an impact on that contest. So Tristan Sherry really just epitomised that pressure and that tackling and that corralling emphasis that we had all game. And I really do yourself a favour and watch that footage. There's definitely clips of it online. It's fantastic stuff. Moving on, I thought the defenders, they all had great moments throughout the game. They all, as I mentioned earlier, for most of the game, both defences were on top, and I thought, whilst Barras and McGovern were playing a fantastic intercept game, our defenders were having their own moments as well. Aiden Core had a ripper contest when he was outnumbered about 4-1. He won it and went up the other end for Steve-O's goal in the second quarter, the first goal that we scored. And I think, in a way, that kind of set up us for the rest of the day. Because if Core doesn't win that contest, I have no doubt that West Coast go on and kick their second goal. And it's a different story because all of a sudden we're down by 3 goals, essentially. So he had a fantastic moment. I thought overall had a pretty good game. I mentioned Archer. He was fantastic all night on Liam Ryan. Luke McDonald was another one that I thought, could have come in for votes. He came across and intercepted pretty well all night, particularly early. He was fantastic. Chom and Cal Dawson had moments, and Fisher accumulated just trying to get the ball out. I thought Darcy Tucker had another reliable game, except for he has one clanger game, Darcy Tucker, and he had a set shot that got smothered, unfortunately. But aside from that, I think he's played quite well the last couple of weeks in that halfback role. So, I think overall the defence was really promising. They had their moments. They didn't have a perfect game, but I think holistically, if the ball wasn't coming in really quickly, they stood up quite well, and I thought were standouts to three-quarter time. I thought a big difference in this game was that we made a concerted effort all day to lower our eyes and look for shorter, safer options going forward. Sheasel's 4 goal assists is a big part of that, but it wasn't just him. Eddie Ford found Nick Larkey twice just by making a quick decision to pass it short to a safe option. The build-up to Simpkin's first goal of that last quarter came from some safe overlapping handball and some short kicks down the wing as opposed to bombing it long to a big pack. And we saw LDU doing the same thing, looking for a shorter option when he could have blazed away at times. Not all of those kicks were accurate, successful kicks, but I thought our intent to look for that shorter option and to look for a safer option as opposed to just trying to dump at the 60 metres and hope for a contested mark was a massive improvement. I thought that our intent was there all game. So I don't know if that was a deliberate change or if that's just something that we had a little bit more time with the ball, so we were able to slow ourselves down a bit. It's hard to say, but to me, it looked like we were able to execute that most of the time, and it made a big difference because all of a sudden we weren't asking Larkey or Zerha to take a massive pack mark 20 metres out from goal. We were asking, Jai Simpkin to take an uncontested chest mark 50 metres out, or we were asking Larkey to stand still while Eddie Ford hits him from 15 metres away. So, I thought that was a fantastic win. And really promising for what we're trying to do with the ball moving forward. Finally, I just think no matter what you say about that second Simpkin goal, like I said, worst case scenario, it's a ball up 45 metres out inside our 50. We put ourselves in a position to win it. And then we kicked a sealer after that. It was a brilliant goal from Paul Curtis, who hadn't had a great game up to that point. So I think that a massive positive we can take out of the game is that we learned a way to win. And that's something that we have struggled with for the past 2 or 3 years. We just have not known how to win. And we got ourselves behind in the game. We found a way to kick 2 goals after that point to win the game. And that kind of thing is invaluable. I think whilst it would have been more relaxing to, win by 5 goals, the fact that we had to claw it back and actually win the game, I think we'll get more out of the game, even though it did make me really, really nervous on the couch and at times make me think, okay, we've lost it. But we didn't. We got across the line, and I truly hope we're celebrating that for what it is, because it's a fantastic way to start the weekend. So that's the match wrap up. Feel free to just put that on repeat and listen to it a couple more times, because who knows how many more wins we've got for the rest of the year. We do play West Coast again later on in Melbourne. We've got Richmond late. We've got Hawks late, although they look to be in some pretty good form, unfortunately, at the moment. So, look, if that's our one win, I certainly hope it's not. But if that's our one win, feel free to just play this one every week if we get belted, because that's what I would be doing. We'll have a quick look at the other rest of the news from the week. Our VFL side won earlier on Saturday afternoon, a 66-60 win against Coburg. Coburg were really coming hard late and trying to get over the top of us, but they just weren't quite able to. Some decent performers in there. I mean, we know what Lazaro can do at VFL level. He had 33 disposals and 7 clearances. Wilfield was a little bit more quiet, but really good with the ball with his disposal. 17 disposals, kicked a goal, 6 tackles, 5 clearances. Greenwood does what he does. 27 disposals, 8 tackles, 12 clearances. So they were probably the best. Sellers kicked 3 goals, 3. Pretty hard to see him getting back into the side at the moment, just based on the absolute lack of impact he was able to have when he did get in. But I think he's a chance for later in the year. Riley Hardiman looked really good off half-back, so he could be an option potentially to come back in before Miller Bergman finds his way back into the side. He had 22 disposals. And then our new recruits, our mid-season recruits, Bryn Teakle at times looked fantastic. He had 14 disposals, 1 goal, 4 marks, 9 hitouts. Geordie Payne had 9 disposals, did a little bit of tackling, did a little bit early, but I think he'll take his time to find his feet playing this high level. But, all in all, I don't think there's going to be too many changes to the side given we won. Lazaro, Wilfield, Greenwood, I can't see any of them coming in. Obviously, Will Dawson's going to need to be replaced, but given he was playing forward, I'm not sure what that means. Like, it's probably more likely that just means Zane Dersma potentially comes back in, and he didn't play VFL because he was the travelling emergency. So that's probably the easy change to predict at this stage. We know McKercher is hopefully not far away, and Griffin Logue similarly is not too far away, but it seemed as though maybe they're a couple of weeks away. I don't know if Griff will come straight back into the AFL. I kind of would half expect that he'd maybe play some limited game time in the VFL first, but look, who knows? He's back in full training now, so he's every possibility that he'll be back in the next month or so. The only other news from the week, Callum Dawson has signed a very short contract extension. He's only signed to the end of this year, and he's inked an extension to the end of next year, 2025. So I think it's good to get a little bit more security there. He's obviously had a good start to the season, and with Ben Mackay out, has found himself having much more opportunity in that defence. So I'm quite happy to extend him just for a year and see how the next 18 months goes, because he's obviously not going to be a superstar, or I shouldn't say obviously, who knows, maybe he will be. But, if he ends up being sort of our second or third tool long term, I think I could see that. But he also could be a stopgap. It's probably a little early to tell. So I think just giving him a little bit of security and shoring up another player for next year is a positive, but you wouldn't want to be offering someone like Callum Dawson a super, super long contract like we have some of our other players. So, yeah, not a lot to see there. I think it's just some regulation list management going on there. In terms of next week, we have Collingwood on Sunday, the 16th of June. It's a 1 p.m. game at Marvel Stadium. And we will have 2 more days rest than the Pies. So I am hoping that we can maybe get them in the second half of that game. He said optimistically. They'll be playing coming off the King's birthday big freeze clash on the Monday. So they've got a 6-day break. We've got a nice 8-day break. And hopefully that accounts for something. We will be coming off the trip to Perth, which probably, negates a day of that rest. But yeah, I honestly think we're a good chance to perform well. I don't expect to win, obviously. I think holistically we can't just go... We can't expect to replicate what we did against West Coast, against Collingwood, who are obviously a better side. But, I think winning can do wonderful things, and hopefully we take a bit of that confidence and a bit of that, power that we got out of that win, and we can turn it into some positive play against Collingwood. Like I said, I don't expect to win, but if we were able to compete and maybe be in the game late, which we've really struggled to do against literally every other team, I think that'd be a success. So hopefully we all get along to the game, and North Melbourne fans are able to celebrate North Melbourne again, because it's really been a hard path the last few years, and we're not out of it yet, don't get me wrong, but it is nice to be able to go into the week with a win. And I think probably that's the last thing I want to touch on. Just enjoy the week. It's rare for us to be going into work on a Monday or a Tuesday in this instance after a win. You best believe when I get to school on Tuesday, I'll be giving it to the kids, because they have been giving it to me all year. And every Friday I'll say to them, all right, make sure you're watching it Saturday twilight, whenever we happen to be playing, and they all groan and say, Mr. Hunt, they're not going to win. Well, we did it this week, guys. We finally did it. So I'll be celebrating. We don't need to go over the top. We don't want to be one of those fans that's won one game and thinks they're premiership contenders, and none of our fans will be thinking that. But I just think it's nice to be happy and to walk into work or to school, wherever you're going on Tuesday, and not have to worry about people giving you a bit of stick about what happened on the weekend. So enjoy the week. I'll be enjoying the week. It's nice that we've got until Sunday of next weekend to enjoy the victory. Yeah, hope you have a fantastic winning week, and I'll be back to talk to you again after that game against Collingwood. Go North! Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.